My name's Matt, and I will be talking with Alain Denzler about human-centric AI in sales and cultural considerations. Alain, I'm really happy to have you here today. How are you doing?
Pleasure to be here, Matt. Really, yeah, good. Thanks. How are you?
Thank you. Fine, busy with the podcast, as you probably know that I already mentioned. But with any further ado, I would love to start to go straight away to the question. But before that, you work for the Salesforce. You work for a really successful pitcher, really successful startup in Switzerland, and now you are building your own stuff. I promised yesterday my colleague from Google that I will not mention AI too many times in the podcast because this is a popular topic, but I think we couldn't get without it because you are building a startup around the AI. So maybe you could tell a few words about the company itself.
Yeah, so getitAI, it has it in the name, right? It is unavoidable even if you just pronounce the name itself. No, we're building something, that's going to change a lot of the ways that people interact with brands online. We've kind of grown up knowing this kind of online sales space as e-commerce or like buying stuff was just always something you do alone. It was convenient 24/7, but it was more a search-first experience. You mentioned Google before. They dominated that space there, and the websites of brands were mostly copying that. And somehow all about getting you onto the site, they paid a lot of money for it, and then you're just left alone and you search. And that's something that at getitAI, we're trying to change because it's not an optimal thing to do. And Picasso once said, I do not seek, I find. We'd like to go more to the find. So instead of Googling it, you want to just get it. So that's what we help. We put digital humans onto those online spaces where brands want to sell things. And then all of a sudden, you can kind of miniaturize your brand ambassador, have all the knowledge that your best salesperson would have, and then have that represented 24/7 on all the channels that the brand services, right? So anywhere where the customer, chooses to engage, that's where they will have that superhuman sales agent present to sell to them.
And it works pretty well. So you showed me the demo. I have seen some demos in the past from other. I showed from one company, and it looked really creepy. In your case, it was pretty realistic, I would say. So it's already nice. I asked for beta, right?
Yeah. So it's still beta, but we are, not doing the avatars ourselves. We work with partners there, and I think the point is that you want it to be indistinguishable from humans. There's this expression of uncanny valley. I don't know if you've probably heard of that, and that just describes of this creepiness you refer to, and if it's close but just not close enough. Sometimes it's better to stay away further, right? So to make it less human, so that it doesn't have this creepiness effect. But I think with the recent advancements in Gen AI, you've also seen the Omni, the OpenAI GPT-4 Omni presentation, where they were already hinting towards her. With Scarlett Johansson wasn't too happy about that one, right? Even though I think I read about it and it was quite legit. They paid actors. It was all other actors. So there's actually somebody losing out now on that one because that's quite easy to prove. They flew them all in. There's receipts, there's contracts and stuff. So this lady that has the Sky voice, I'm quite certain it's legit.
Really?
But yeah, it's. I would say 99% certain.
Okay.
They made a public statement online, and they have evidence. This is something accounting wise you can prove. Here's a contract. This is the lady. She just wants to stay anonymous because otherwise, you don't want to you just want to get the money if you can, right? So she could, and that was a great opportunity for her. But her. But it was obviously too close to Scarlett Johansson's voice. So that's the debate I think that's going to happen now is how close in terms of likeness can you get with the big stars, having a legitimate kind of like a voice double that has she has the right to sell her voice and her likeness, and she wants to kind of make profit out of that, and then the big stars can block it. So that's kind of like the debate then. I get the point of the stars and all the thing that happened last year also in Hollywood, where they were striking and an AI and all that. And now this is the effect of it, right? And people coming in and saying, hey, we have likenesses, and then it just happens to be quite similar to your voice. So what are you going to do now? So I'm curious to see how legislation, how that would be laid out by the legislative arm or the, I guess, the courts, right? Interesting topic to follow.
Yeah, I fully agree. I was listening to All In podcast on the way here to Zurich, and they were discussing the Scarlet Johansson thing. But definitely, I think this will disrupt the market. It's the same. I don't know if you've heard like the artists like Sting or like the Police. They are selling the whole catalog or Bob Dylan of their music, right? So for the royalties that the I don't know, Universal somebody will get in the future when they are already not with us, right? So I think it will definitely disrupt the market of the actors because they're super expensive, right?
Yeah.
So,
But I mean, the point why I mentioned is that the presentation showed really nicely how you can overcome that uncanny valley. And they're calling it real time. It's close to real time with the voices. And then you can have this natural dialogue with all of a sudden this digital voice that is AI. And that's something that overcomes the uncanny valley. And that's where we position ourselves. We've not taken the stance of trying to go like, abstract and not making it like a human. We want to make it human because of that connection. And then once that connection is there, you can do way more things that before were just, fantasy still.
yeah, cool stuff. So when I saw your website and you showed me the demo, I was already thinking like how SaaS companies could do sales with that, like enterprise sales, because this is really expensive. You have all those pitch decks, you have like a huge sales team. And with that, you can automate the process, which is like you can cut the cost so much and have a repeatable, scalable quality of that.
Yeah, 100%. So we're not starting directly in the software space, although it is directly adjacent to it. We're in commerce first. But I think what you mentioned is intuitively correct. We don't want to go replace humans. That's not the idea just now. Maybe at some point that will be on the cards. I hope not. I also like doing sales, But the current focus is on markets that are or that in spaces that do not have a human incumbent. So imagine the commerce, but also software. Within software, not the enterprise sales teams, but the product-led growth. Those guys don't have any money to spend on people that are like actually present and having calls and booking demos and all that. They might have a very light touch approach, but even then, it's still costly. Those we want to help out. So there we see potential. And then you can scale it up. You can also look at channel sales and other things where there's like a lot of like these long tail underserved market segments that then all of a sudden become serviceable with a digital human. And that's kind of the thing. Like there's a lot of discussion around AI and like replacing humans and losing workers and stuff. This is one of those areas where we don't have to do that because as a customer now, there's a lot of them that are getting left out. I was in pharma already there before, and then at Pitcher as well. You have to be very strict in terms of how you target and whom you target. We did lots of exercises around the world with local market teams, with lots of data you get in and stuff, and then you just go after basically 80% of your revenue, which typically in a retail setup comes from 20% of number of customers. And so you've got a long tail of 80% that gets nothing. No service whatsoever, no love. And so those are the ones that now all of a sudden can also get a face of the brand and interact with the digital human and have that service level experience that you would expect from major brands. That's it's astonishing sometimes how little love those brands give for the B2B space, that long tail. Like, here's our website. It happens to be a shitty website. We don't really care that much. Just go help yourself, and off to the races they are.
And your team, like you are fully remote, I would say. Like your team is super distributed, like even like across the US, because you have a lot of guys in US. You have the co-founders in US, and I'm wondering, because I even noticed that you have one ex-Googler from I think it was Silicon Valley, right? Yeah. So how do you recruit those kind of like how do you recruit those guys like at such an early level? Especially like, it's really hard to build some kind of brand and at such an early stage recruit the people from like in the big corps or the famous corps like Google, for instance.
So yeah, one of the co-founders is like ex-Fang. So he was actually in the digital assistant space since the digital assistant space exists. So he started in the founding team of the Google Assistant, moved on then afterwards to Meta, and worked on the whole kind of metaverse or something, or the Oculus team there. And then now is at Samsung. So also in the Bixby team there doing digital assistants. And so that was somebody that we won over as a co-founder. And that, of course, then one leads to the other. Like once that person is in and believes in the vision and mission, there's lots of people also from Fang that want to join a startup that has such a strong disruptive power. That's all I can say. I mean, that everything else is really, it's the team, it's the kind of the dynamics behind that, and then it kind of starts rolling. Well, one more mention. The remote first setup really helps, because a lot of the Silicon Valley companies have gone back to making people or forcing people at least into a hybrid setup where they have to be in the office 2-3 days a week at least. And so if you're the one that offers remote and 100% remote, you can all of a sudden get people that have actually installed themselves in other locations because they thought, and the same guys that are forcing them back to hybrid actually told them during COVID, hey, we're going to be remote first permanently, right? So if you adjust your setup of your family or your living situation or whatever, and then all of a sudden that changes again, then that's good for us. That plus the overall kind of like cutting the people last year, that was also beneficial for us.
That's a really cool advantage, I must say. So it was funny for me when I saw like Zoom bringing the people back to the office. Like, come on, guys! Like you were telling us that,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, look at their share price. I think not all decisions they make are beneficial for investors, let's say.
And I'm just wondering, because you work on Peter, you worked in Salesforce, and I think that the previous company was the Merck.
Yes, correct.
So like a lot of experiences, and I think building the startup is kind of easier when you collect the experiences, especially with the enterprises. So you have a good training, you have a good fundamentals. So if you could mention about something, was it like helpful? Do you have some lessons learned that you think like why, and now you think like this new venture will be successful because of the A, B, and C, like lessons learned that I had?
Most definitely, yes. I think the way of working that we learned at Pitcher is something that's really good in this remote setup. Pitcher was already remote first before COVID hit. That was just how this is the DNA of the company. Like everything went through Slack. That was like our digital HQ. And then we had like our project management tools, and then some meetups and stuff and hangouts. That's something we can easily transfer over into the Get It culture as well, and which people appreciate very much. And that's something we've had, a lot of people come in also volunteering, just working for free, like internships or just people that were like bored from their day job and they just like helped out in the spare time that they had. Very cool to see. And they would come into our meetings, and we, it's typically quite structured, how the things go about, and they compare it to other things they've seen, and they're like quite astonished how that can go about. So that, I would say, yes, there's definitely transferability that we can bring into the team.
Are there some lessons learned from the organization? Of course, you don't have to mention any, that you say like, I would do it differently when I start my company. I don't want to do it this way. Like, this is my lessons learned out of my previous experiences.
So I think what we've seen is that what works best is that you don't prescribe too much of the how. Like, I think a vision is good and where you want to get to. And if you have experienced people afterwards, they will figure out how. So, and that's something we've learned a lot before. I think maybe I'll make a short pause on that, in that thought, and just make one excursion to the fact that at Pitcher we were very much driven with like what customers want, and I call it customer capture even. So we went after the biggest of the big, like the top S&P 500s, and they're just used to working with agency like SaaS companies where whatever they say, like my wish is their demand. No, sorry. But my wish is your command. Exactly, that's the right one. So that's in that setup. It's typically quite unhealthy, and it does not allow you the same type of like freedom that the teams also then get to do what they think is best. And that's what we're deliberately doing different now. And the instructions are clear that the target of the company is not to get the whales, but rather to get the more nimble players out there, like between 5 million and less than S&P 500, but probably not listed in the company in the stock market yet. Some private company led by founders or something like that. That's what we're after. They're more agile and fast, and sales cycles are shorter and all that. So that allows us then, and that's why I just made that excursion. Now back to the initial thought, that's what allows us to give that freedom of the how. Because we say, this is the vision, and then you guys figure it out. And then we can still push back if it doesn't fulfill what we think it needs to be fulfilling. But I think that makes a lot of difference. And then you can have what I like, that Spotify model. I don't know if it's coming into the ages now, but that's something we weren't able to implement before, although we wanted to. And that's something that we're very much kind of like after now. It's like just giving that freedom to the teams, having those squads of specialists that are doing stuff, having fun, and figuring it out. I mean, that's what we've always seen also in the previous company. Like, if the best engineers and the best people overall you get if you have interesting problems to solve and don't dictate too much how they have to solve it. And that's how you keep them at bay, so to say, right?
And you started the company during the recession phase, right? So the big techs are laying off people, the money are really expensive. Like, we came from hyper demand for tech into like almost like no demand, like the VCs are not pouring the money. So it must be difficult, but I don't know, like, do you see the influence of those events like on the things that we are doing? Because you are in AI, so maybe this is the thing like completely different.
Yeah, so we're definitely feeling that. And that's also one of the main roles that I do, right? So I'm at getitAI as founder. I'm also doing a lot of that, investment things. That's what I'm kind of trying to push forward. So I do get that feeling. It helps to be AI. I think you get funds that otherwise others would not get at this moment. But I think for sure we did feel the interest rate hikes. We are getting the info that the funds that used to be like 300, 400 million in size are now more like 30, 50 million in size. So they will, and they have still the same amount of startups knocking at the door or more, because Gen AI, there's a lot of people that want to do something there. And so they have more people coming in and less funds to distribute. So it's harder. Yeah, that we do feel. But we've been able to secure some angels and some big names in Silicon Valley as well in terms of venture capital. So I think that's something that at the end, if you show that the team can deliver, that you can build traction, then my job as getting those investments in should also be easier. Yeah, but generally I would say there's still money that wants to fund good teams and good ideas, but it probably has to have a bit more traction to it than it used to have. Yeah.
So what are your goals, like, let's say, in the next 12 months? Do you go to have paying customers or maybe active users on a beta? What is your roadmap and Uber goals?
So we would like to launch the beta program next month. So that's quite close. The team has been working hard to get that to fruition. And with that also, we should be generating revenues already. That should help also get in the funding side, makes my job easier. And, then basically once you have revenue, you've proven product market fit. And from there you can start growing the customer base. So we've been also getting a lot of traction from brands incoming and asking if we can, there's word of mouth already. People are spreading the word and so we can start choosing also whom to work with, and to make sure that we're really focusing on that ideal customer profile and not having that customer capture. We had a discussion with Pepsi, And it went exactly in that direction where they were kind of expecting us to put in lots and lots and lots of work before they even select anything to do with us. And that was like, we basically told them that's not what we're interested in. And they basically said, so that was the smartest thing a startup told us in the whole year so far. Because typically the startups are very eager to get them as a brand. And then they go they spend 100K only on just lawyers and legal reviews and all that stuff. So it's quite a huge, big like pre-investment to get them going. And then you're basically a slave, right? So, So so the Uber goals would be get the platform launched, generate revenue, and then grow. Simple, right? It's not that big. The KPIs are also quite simple since the setup is like being a giant sales rep, like being the sales rep version of her, right? That's kind of how you can imagine it. And so sales reps are incentivized on generating sales, and our whole team then knows if they have any spare minute, and they should invest it into optimizing the way that we sell.
Nice. I think makes a lot of sense. Like, and the games of angel investing, they change a lot. So what I noticed, like now on LinkedIn, because I invested like in some companies, and if I'm getting the pitch, one of the first sentences is like the amount of monthly recurring revenue, right? So I haven't seen this before, and I'm lit tech maybe like 13 or 14 years. So it makes a lot of sense right now and during the tough times. But regarding you already gave really good tip regarding the clients, right? To attract the companies like Pepsi at the very beginning, because it's really costly. You are still small. You probably don't have the lawyers and you probably don't have the time to close the deal in 1.5 years or stuff like this, right? But maybe could you mention some pain points or challenges, especially for the startups in AI world that you see? Maybe something that not many people are talking about from the outside. Do you see some challenges, especially in this space?
I think what's interesting how it evolves is the pace. The pace is extraordinary, and I think the thing that people don't realize, a lot of like the apps that were building or being built last year were basically what people call wrappers, right? They just kind of have this LLM and then there's a little wrapper around it and it looks cool, and then those get replaced very quickly and don't have any moat. And maybe the moat thing is the discussion in itself. I'm not a big fan of like discussing moats for pre-seed companies, but what I do think is that when you look at what used to be, when you look at that pace, you have to make sure that you don't become irrelevant with the next update of the models that are coming out, and they will inevitably come out, and they come out at a certain pace. And it's interesting to see if that'll kind of establish itself, like with iOS 10, 11, 12 every year, one new one. I think it might come into that kind of pace, but let's see. But the point is that with that pace, how we try to do it is that we try to focus on things that used to be impossible without AI, and now they've just become like very difficult. So things that were hard are now easy. Those you probably shouldn't do. That's just something that'll be like done by some other bigger platform, horizontal player or so. But if you like within our space now focus on a niche and then have that very difficult problem that used to be impossible, then we believe that you can have quite a good existence, and they don't have to be afraid of the next model coming out. And what I think is quite wise, I heard that from Sam Altman actually, is he thinks the most investable companies are those that ask him eagerly when they're finally releasing the next update of their model, and not the ones that are like, clinging to their chairs before the announcement comes out because they're in that impact zone of the big ones. So we try to also stay clear of that.
And I'm wondering regarding yourself, right? Because you started, you are one of the three. You are four co-founders, right? So like everybody brings something to the equation to make it successful. And I'm wondering, what are your superpowers, right? What do you think, like, why this company will be successful because of your skills? like what you have learned in the past, maybe.
Yeah, well, I'm maybe too modest to answer that one with the superpowers. I bring in vision. I bring in the human touch. I like making people also feel comfortable when they're coming to the company. And like I said before, like giving them enough space to be their best. I've always thought that it's ideal if you can bring in people that are smarter than you, because you're as good as your team is, and if your team's better than you are, then you are also automatically in average quite a lot better. So I always try to follow that principle, and it's not let me down. It makes the work environment a lot more appealing for all the people involved, and it makes it easier to reach your targets. I mean, I think the whole thing with the people being the most important resource, it holds true. You just have to really make it like something you live and not just something you put on a slide. It's all about that. And if you get those people, the right ones in, then they can do magic, and that's pretty cool. So I like to be that person that enables and then lets the others do the things, so I don't have to handhold all the time. We've got a really good product team together. We've got the experts in the growth area there. So I can, I'm more on the fundraising side, trying to get the people, like I said before, it's a challenge, right? But they are just kind of being able to, have that vision, have the selling skills as well to convince people to buy into your vision. That's what I think I do quite okay.
And I'm always looking for lessons learned that we could share with the audience, like the people who are listening to the podcast always like to have the lessons learned that are not so obvious. And like in your case, I really recently asked this question, like what was the hardest thing in your career and what you have learned from that?
So I think one hard one was the actual sales job out in the field, like going from door to door every day for 1.5 years, visiting doctors. First of all, it was like doctors, and I was just an MBA graduate or business admin. Like I did business and I graduated and I went into a sales job selling medicines to doctors. And I was like, how am I going to do that? That was really hard. And it just, took some time then to realize that they're also just humans, and they might have been able to learn the encyclopedia by heart when they graduated, but then in their everyday life, they're very much kind of like doing, one patient after the other, and they're happy to have some academic sales guy in between that kind of brightens their day. And they don't know within that whole spectrum of medicine everything there is to know. And within my areas of I was doing diabetes and osteoporosis and asthma and stuff, I knew quite a lot. I knew a lot about the area. I knew a lot about what other doctors think as well, and how this is being done in practice, and I could share that across. And it was really hard, but you kind of grow into that. I'm not sure if it's the hardest thing I've ever done. I think the other challenge I had was then within Pitcher. We had a hard time. While we were building a really good team, we were building a cool platform, but we were then kind of redoing one really core part of it, which was harder to scale. And I had just brought in some folks in India. We had some very specific engineering talent we needed. And it just happened to be that those people were all in Ahmedabad in India, because that was like the engineering headquarter of one of those companies that had that kind of a knowledge. And so we had a team there. And I had before worked mainly with European, Polish, a lot of Polish engineers, very reliable, very, very kind of, logical and planning and communicating also clearly of what expectations you can have and where they're uncertain. And then when they commit, they deliver. Or if they don't, then that's something typically they delivered. I've never had a point where I had team members that just didn't deliver, even though they had promised something. And then with the Indian culture, that was really hard for me, because I'm typically a trusting person. I hire people that I think have the right merits and then let them do the thing and trust. And there I was let down in the trust, because it was a cultural thing. I didn't know about that. The cultural thing was that they would always just confirm whatever I'm asking from them and try to look good in terms of the times that the dates that they set. So it's not it wasn't this logical, rational approach. It was more about this like making your boss happy thing. And I fell for it, and I trusted that it's going to work, and then it didn't. And then I said, well, okay, by when? And again, that didn't work. And so we went into a bit of a tailspin there with some of those core elements which we had hired. And to rehire someone, you can fire them, of course, which we then occasionally did. But you could rehire, that just takes a lot of time. And in certain project scenarios, you don't have that time. So we were a bit stranded there, and that was hard. And it took that was the first major setback that I had in a project in my whole career. And so we really had to take a step back and just also manage expectations with the customer, and then go back to the drawing board and kind of redesign that part, which was just kind of conceptually done wrong from the start there, which the team was owning, but then kind of over-promising on and not raising the flag. I think it's always important, and that's the culture I want to live, is it's totally okay not to be able to do something. It's okay to do mistakes, but it's very important to kind of raise the hand early. If I say, hey, here's a task to do, I expect people to be like, hey, I can't do this. Or how should I do this? I don't have the competency now. If you want me to do this, it'll take very long. Or, you get somebody else to do it, which has the competency or so. But just not saying anything, silently accepting it, and just being like, oh, shit, I'm going to have to learn this all on the job. It'll take me, forever, or, I'll have to work all the weekends or so. That's on you, right? That's the part where I expect them to speak up and be like, no, maybe not the best. Or then just make me aware, and I can, you can still take the decision then and be like, yeah, okay, you can still, I'll have that as a learning assignment, and I'll just, factor that in. It'll be less reliable code. It'll be less reliable timing and stuff, but it's cool. And other times you can also take the decision being like, no, okay, in that case, thanks for letting me know. Let's do it with somebody else. There's nothing lost in that part. So yeah, that was, I think, some of the learnings I took out of that was this. There's the strong cultural element to it, which it's not something you can read about. It's something you have to experience, I guess. But having the awareness of it probably helps. And so we've taken those learnings, and with the new company, we're not going as broad geographically, because I think it's good to have certain centers where you have, even if it's remote, you do engineering gathering. There was an engineering gathering in Bucharest, and this was much easier to have people then come together. And even if you're remote first, you should also have these touch points every, I don't know how often, it depends how often, you can vary, but every quarter or so, every half a year, you should see each other, just to have that human touch as well, and the connection that you get from that. So that, the learning one is let's say the cultural learnings. The number two is then having this certain hotspots where you focus on, maybe where you also know the culture enough to not to tap into too many traps or have too many learnings, because one of the most valuable things we have is time, right? So if you're losing that time and resources, yeah, both of it, then it's a learning block where you might kind of overcompensate the cost advantages of going, let's say, to India or to Philippines or something like that. And then, yeah, from engineer perspective, not going too broad also in time zones. And with US and Europe, we got two major time zones. I mean, continents, of course, with multiple time zones. And once you go broader, once you also have Asia involved, then it starts being, the follow the sun principle. There's always going to be darkness somewhere, and somebody's going to have to put in really long hours at strange times, and that's just gets more complicated. So if you want close collaboration, the world is kind of flat, but still has some edges, right? So there's limitations to it, yeah. So.
And the last question, last but not least, I always like to ask about the books, resources, maybe conferences, podcasts, something that has been really influential and beneficial for you as a leader. So you say you had this aha moment after, learning from the source of knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a few. I really have quite a diverse set of podcasts that I listen to. There is one of them is Lex Friedman. I really like the way that he goes into depth with those thought leaders. I don't do that every week, but I do listen to quite a few of his interviews that are like 2 hours long, and they just capture my attention. And it's I once, when I was still, what was that, like in my 20s, when the Steve Jobs biography came out, that's one of those audiobooks I was listening to because of that same reason. It's kind of like going into the heads of those people. They're all people, they're all humans, right? So they all kind of have their way of doing things. And if you want to learn a little bit of how they think about the world and think about problems and how they go about solving those problems, I find very fascinating. And so, like, one of the ones I can remember quite strongly just now was the one he had with Mark Anderson, and that really kind of like shone a big spotlight onto this whole phase of introducing the internet to the world. Like, because Anderson was like getting famous with, I think it was Netscape or so, right? Or the browser, just the general, like this, the browser being the door to the world, for which we are very used to now. That kind of came from him, and that way of thinking is just fascinating, because we are at this kind of a place right now, and I love the way that he framed also the fact that, like, when the internet, what was it again? When the internet came up, when TV came up, or film, cinematography, the first thing was, when they had that, is they took the previous medium as the input or the content of the new medium. So they were actually making a video of a play, right? It's funny now to think about it, because now, like, Hollywood is just, there's no play. It's all in real world, and like, now it's even computers and stuff. But this, if you extrapolate that to the next level, which is going to be agentic internet, right? There's going to be agents that are doing most of the talking. Right now, I think 80% of the internet traffic is video. In the future, 80% of the traffic will just be agent-to-agent communication. But in the beginning, when you have these LLMs and the agents and all that, the content that they will have is the internet still. So they're feeding off the internet. Until then, that it will be then the actual, let's call it the AI native content, which replaces what we used to have with internet. And that's also how we think at getitAI, is that this whole search first web that we know about, and I'm not talking about social, because social is a very different dynamic. It's not search first, it's basically feeds. And I'm going to just exclude that part. But the part where we're actually going into the browser and searching stuff and looking through websites and all that, that's going to be replaced. And that's something that our kids are going to be like, whoa, Dad, did you actually spend so much time searching? How is that? Like, what did you do the whole day? Like, well, just tell somebody what you want and they'll present you with the results, like this find, not seek, that I mentioned in the beginning. That's kind of what I see coming. And that's what I, very clearly saw mapped out there. We don't want to be search first. We want to be agent first, in terms of also the experience that you get. And that'll be very different. The same way we're talking here together is different than if you write together. It'll be like that kind of a contrast. So that's one that, and I listen to The Economist every week. That's been something I've been following. I'm curious to see, by the way, how that's going to pan out now, because one of the reasons I was listening to The Economist every week is because it was actors that are reading that out aloud. And now if I have a ChatGPT result, I can just read aloud and it sounds like an actor. So if this technology now gets applied to other sources, I can, again, there in my listening rituals, expand my sources, and that'll be interesting. I'd like to have some sort of an app that gives me like a feed or like a summary of different things together that just gets read to me, that I can listen to when I'm doing some exercise, or I'm like cleaning the house or cooking or something like that. So that's the other big source. And then there's some cool books like, for product managers and product leaders, like I think it's called Inspired. I always forget the authors, but like that was a good one where I took from that, where you're saying that as a startup, you just have to make sure that, back to my funding role, right? You have to make sure that you don't run out of money before you've proven product market fit, right? That was a good one. So basically, in the beginning, a lot of the VCs and everybody's like, yeah, so does it work? You're like, yeah, obviously I'm asking for money here because we don't have those numbers yet, and hence the valuation is lower and everything. But yeah, you're racing towards proving product market fit. Once you have that, I think the world will be a bit different, even though I think it'll all adjust to whichever realm you're in, it'll just be different challenges you're facing, right? But right now, that's like my holy grail is to have that product market fit proven by the team, and then I have an easier job than bringing in the money that they need to grow further.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Alan. I really, what's sticking in my mind is the thing that you mentioned about the revolution, the point number 2, right? So you are changing, let's say we have the internet and then we have the AI, so you don't have to type, you have to, like, you just get the answer that you want. So it reminds me the story of Sony. So like when the Sony released the tapes and you can listen music on the tapes, right? On the Walkman, right? And they have already like a second team working in a different room on the thing that will be the next big thing after the Walkman. So like they released the Discman. So I think in your case, what you are doing, you are building like like the Discman after the Walkman. If I if I think about the internet, so
or MP3
or MP3, right? This is a better comparison.
Yeah. As long as we're not doing probably many people don't remember the mini disc anymore. Remember that one?
Yeah. It was
as long as we're not the ones that are creating the mini disc, which had like just a 1-year stint and then they were like completely erased. That's fine, I think that's.
So I wish you to be successful and create the next MP3 3.0 or something like that. So.
No, I think that's one of those like moments in our generation. And that's something like everybody says, like, yeah, the people from Bitcoin, like the cryptocurrency guys said the same and all. But I think this one you really feel in this society right now, it's going to be bigger than other big things that came along. For me, this is a once-in-a-generational shift that we're experiencing. The last time we saw something similar was with the internet. And now this will be such a dramatic way because we have so much touch points with the digital world now that this whole way of... It's the first time in human history where technology is adopting to us and not vice versa. That's if you take that to mind once, that's the whole game changer. So far it was always like, hey, here's a new app, learn it, And now it's just like, well, hey, here's my assistant. You tell me like how I'm gonna get this thing done that I want to get done. And that's just fundamentally different. So this I'm really excited about the next decade or so. And to see how the everyday life it'll change so dramatically that our kids, like I said, our kids will not know this world that we're in right now. The same way it's weird for them to imagine that we were growing up without computers in the beginning.
What a boring life, right? Exactly. Awesome. Thank you for a great talk, Alan. I wish you success.
Yeah, likewise, Matt. Thanks so much.
Follow Matt on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Better Tech Leadership newsletter.